Cheers, guys. What are you doing while watching? Just relaxing or multitasking? Let me know.
They say every woman remembers the moment she got engaged, the precise second the world tilted just a bit, and everything in it felt possible, glowing like you were standing in the center of something sacred. I remember my moment too, except mine got hijacked by a smirk and a goddamn wink across the room, served cold by my younger sister Ashley, who waited until the champagne flutes were raised and the music dimmed before she stood up, tugged her sundress snug around her waist, and said, "Should I tell them now?" with a twinkle in her eye, like she was about to drop the punchline of some hilarious joke. Only it wasn't a joke, not even close. We were in the backyard of our childhood home, the same place where my parents had grilled burgers for birthday parties and hung Christmas lights that never quite worked right. It was early June, the sun hung low, and fireflies had already started to blink near the hedges. My fiancé, Derek, had just made a short but sweet speech about our engagement. Nothing grand, nothing cheesy, just a simple, heartfelt thank you to our friends and family for coming, and a quiet nod to the life we were about to build. I felt full of hope, of love, of peace even. That was the last time I felt any of that. Ashley had been quiet most of the evening, floating around the patio in a yellow dress with tiny white flowers, sipping on a club soda that nobody thought twice about. She hugged me once when she arrived, late, saying, "You look amazing," but something in her tone was clipped, off, rehearsed. I should have known then. I should have seen it in the way she kept checking her phone, glancing at the crowd like she was waiting for her own entrance. But I didn't see it. I didn't expect it. I never thought my own sister, the girl who used to braid my hair and steal my shoes, would do what she did. The moment she stood up, people turned like she had something important to say. And God, did she. She clinked her glass with a butter knife, took a dramatic pause, and said, "So I know this night is about love and beginnings, and I just wanted to share my own news." My stomach dropped. I didn't know why at first. Maybe some sixth sense, maybe the way my mom's face tightened, but I knew. Then she dropped the bomb. "I'm pregnant. We just found out a few days ago, and surprise!" She spread her arms like she was revealing a game show prize. The crowd erupted in gasps and congratulations. Derek gave a polite clap, looking at me like, "Are we supposed to be happy right now?" And all I could do was stare. My mother cried, of course she did. And my dad tried to do the math out loud, asking when the due date was while Ashley beamed and soaked it all in like she was bathed in golden light. And me, I smiled. Because that's what you do when your own sister turns your engagement party into her pregnancy announcement. You smile, you nod, and you swallow the blood that's rising up your throat. People started gathering around her, asking baby names, touching her stomach even though she wasn't showing yet, offering advice and old wives' tales like it was her baby shower. I stood there frozen, holding a champagne glass that suddenly felt like a prop. Nobody asked me about the wedding date anymore. Nobody looked at my ring. I might as well have disappeared. Later that night, when the string lights were unplugged and the last cousin had driven off, I sat beside Derek on the porch steps, still in my engagement dress, heels off, and knees pulled tight to my chest. He looked over at me and asked gently, "Are you okay?" I didn't answer. I just watched the empty lawn, where my moment had been taken from me. After a long silence, I finally spoke. "She did it on purpose." He didn't argue. He didn't try to soothe me. He just put his arm around me and exhaled slowly, because he knew, hell, we all knew, Ashley had always had a way of turning the spotlight, of making things about her, of walking into any room and owning it like she'd paid the damn mortgage. But this was different. This wasn't impulse or accident. This was calculated, cold, a knife between the ribs with a ribbon tied on it. And the worst part? Nobody seemed to notice. Or worse, nobody cared. Because she was pregnant now. She was glowing. She was the future. She was the miracle. And I was just the girl who was supposed to get married. That night, lying in bed beside Derek, with mascara still clinging to the edges of my lashes and a headache pounding behind my eyes, I whispered into the dark, "I'm not going to forget this." He didn't ask what I meant. He knew better. And now I ask you, if your sister pulled a stunt like that at your engagement party, would you stay quiet? Would you let it slide? Or would you do what I did next? In the days that followed, everything seemed to move forward as if nothing had happened, as if my sister hadn't stepped into the center of my engagement party like a Broadway lead and hijacked the spotlight with a smile and a sparkle in her eye, leaving me to clean up the confetti of what was supposed to be my one moment. And maybe that's what stunned me the most. The silence that followed, the way people didn't just fail to acknowledge what she had done, but actively leaned into it, like they had all agreed without saying a word that she deserved it more. That pregnancy trumped everything else, even lifelong dreams and commitments and vows yet to be spoken. It started with the phone calls, or more precisely, the lack of them, because no one called to talk about the engagement afterward. No one asked how Derek and I were feeling. No one asked about the wedding date or venues, or whether we had picked colors yet. Instead, the messages that did come were filled with soft, syrupy tones and emojis I couldn't stand to look at, with lines like, "I still can't believe your sister's going to be a mom," and "your parents must be over the moon," as though my news had been a warm-up act, a footnote, a polite appetizer before the real announcement came from center stage. Even my mom, who had always insisted on fairness between the two of us growing up, who once made Ashley and I share a birthday party because we were born only 10 days apart, and it wasn't fair for one of us to get more cake than the other, didn't seem to notice the shift, or maybe she did and chose to ignore it. Because every time I tried to bring up the wedding, she'd say something like, "Let's just wait a little while, honey, with everything going on." And the everything was never said outright. But we both knew what it meant. Ashley's pregnancy, Ashley's glow, Ashley's everything. It became harder and harder to speak about the wedding without sounding bitter, so eventually I just stopped speaking about it at all, choosing instead to observe. And in those weeks, I watched her, my sister, from a distance, watched her carefully cultivate her narrative like she was managing a brand, not a pregnancy, posting carefully filtered photos of her barely there baby bump with captions like, "Already in love," and "Our little bean is growing," while tagging her husband, Tom, who always looked slightly confused in every photo, like he hadn't yet figured out that he was part of a performance and not just a future father. She hosted a gender reveal planning brunch. Not the party itself, mind you, just a brunch to plan it. And invited only the women closest to her, which somehow didn't include me, though it did include two of my high school friends who had barely spoken to her in years, but apparently now qualified because they had trendy Instagram followings and could post it later. When I found out from a tagged photo that they'd had a custom cake tasting and mood board session without me, something inside me didn't just hurt, it calcified. Derek noticed. He didn't say much, but I could feel it in the way he moved around me, careful, patient, like I was a glass of water filled to the brim. And one wrong step might cause a spill. One night, we were sitting on the couch, watching a rerun of something we didn't care about, just killing time. And he turned to me with that slow, cautious voice people use when they already know the answer but feel obligated to ask anyway. And he said, "Are we still doing the wedding in the fall?" I stared at the screen. There was a woman crying in a wedding dress, and I remember thinking, God, even the fake brides get their moment. I turned to him, not smiling, not blinking, and said, "No, we're not." He nodded, no follow-up questions. He knew me too well by then, but I wasn't calling it off. No, I was just moving it. Quietly, without fanfare, without a big speech. I emailed the venue and asked for the calendar. I looked for a day with symmetry, with gravity. And when I saw the date, the due date Ashley had mentioned to our mother while brushing crumbs from her lap and giggling about being ready by October, I didn't hesitate. I told the venue I wanted it. I gave them the deposit that night. Nobody knew, not Derek, not even my maid of honor. I wanted it to sit, to wait like a seed planted deep in the ground, ready to bloom at the exact moment it would hurt the most. It wasn't about stealing anything from her. It wasn't even about revenge, not yet. It was about reclaiming something that had been taken, something that had been mine before she smiled and pulled the rug out from under me. I didn't send out the invitations immediately. I wanted her to keep feeling comfortable, to keep planning her baby-centric events with that same smug confidence, to keep thinking the world had bent itself into the shape of her belly. And that's when I realized something else. Nobody was going to say anything to her about what she'd done, not because they didn't notice, but because they didn't want to get involved. It was easier to watch from the sidelines. It was easier to congratulate the glowing pregnant woman and quietly pretend they hadn't witnessed her stealing someone else's thunder. So I said nothing too. But I didn't forget. Not the look on her face. Not the silence afterward. And definitely not the due date. It was going to be a wedding, not a war, but I was done playing nice. The day I dropped the envelopes into the blue metal mailbox on the corner of 5th and Hanover, the ones that had been sitting in a neat, untouched stack on the hallway console for nearly 2 weeks, the weather was warm but not kind, one of those heavy, humid afternoons where the air sticks to your skin and the clouds look like they're holding back something ugly. And I remember thinking, as I watched the small red flag rise and the lid fall shut with a sound that echoed louder in my chest than in my ears, that it was done. The point of no return had arrived, and my silence was no longer passive but loaded, deliberate, a soft and final clapback disguised in linen cardstock and custom calligraphy. The wedding invitations had been printed on thick cream paper, embossed with gold leaf edges, subtle and elegant. Everything Ashley wasn't. The envelope was sealed with a small wax stamp, a symbolic nod maybe to the kind of grace and tradition she had stomped all over with her barefoot backyard announcement. And tucked inside was the date that would, without question, split my family down the middle and forever stain our timeline with a memory too sharp to soften over time. October 15th. Her due date. The first call came 3 days later, late in the evening when I was folding laundry, and Derek was sitting on the floor assembling flat-pack furniture for our new home. It was Ashley, of course. Her name flashed on the screen like a siren, and for a moment I considered letting it ring, watching it fade into voicemail, where her bright, curated voice would likely say something civil, polite, but seething beneath. But I answered. I wanted to hear it. I wanted her to say it. "Hey," she said, light at first, as if she hadn't just received a gut punch in the form of a pastel envelope. "I got your invitation today." I said nothing at first, letting the silence stretch just long enough to be uncomfortable. "You know that's my due date, right?" she asked, not sharply, but with that practiced blend of confusion and accusation she'd mastered since we were kids, back when she used to frame every betrayal like a misunderstanding, like she didn't know better. "I do now," I replied evenly, folding a towel with a focus so pointed it felt like meditation. She laughed. Not the kind you laugh when something's funny, but the kind you do when your face twists and your pride takes a hit. "Wow, that's okay." Then silence again, and I didn't fill it. "I just thought you might want to reconsider," she finally offered, the edge now creeping in, since it might be hard for the family to be in 2 places at once. "Well," I said, placing the towel on the stack, "they'll have to decide which moment matters more." That was the last thing I said before hanging up. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel cruel. I felt accurate, like I had measured the distance between justice and pettiness, and found a space in between where I could live comfortably with myself, even if nobody else understood it. And based on what followed, it was clear not everyone did. 2 days later, I got a call from our mother. Her voice was brittle, like dried leaves underfoot, and I could tell before she even said my name that she had already chosen sides. "Sweetheart," she began, that word she only used when she was about to ask for something she didn't think she had the right to demand. "I know you and your sister have tension, but do you really think October 15th is the best date? I mean, your sister is going to be giving birth and I'm going to be getting married," I said, not unkindly, but with a firmness that told her I wasn't here to be cajoled. "I just don't want the family to feel torn." "They weren't torn when she made my engagement party about her baby," I said, my voice quiet but unwavering. Nobody called to say that was unfair. Nobody asked her to wait to make her announcement. "That's different," she said quickly, instinctively. "No," I replied. "It's not. It's exactly the same." She didn't have a response for that. Only a sigh, the kind that carries years of disappointment and forced compromise. She didn't argue further. She just ended with, "I hope you know what you're doing." And then she hung up. In the weeks that followed, the reactions to the invitation started to trickle in like measured confessions. Some responded with enthusiastic yeses, pretending not to notice the date. Some declined with vague language. "So sorry, wish we could." While others, like my Aunt Lisa, who always played both sides of every family conflict, texted me privately to say, "I support you, but I think it's going to be hard for your mom." Translation: I support you unless it causes too much trouble, and then I support whoever cries louder. Derek watched the fallout unfold with the kind of quiet reverence that only men who've seen the underbelly of sisterhood can possess. He didn't ask questions. He didn't prod. One night, while we were finalizing the guest list and deciding whether to serve pork at the reception knowing Ashley's husband had suddenly decided he was kosher, he looked up from the laptop and said, "You're not doing this for attention, are you?" I looked at him honestly. "I'm doing this because I matter too." He nodded, then went back to reviewing the menu. I never posted about the wedding date online. No grand reveal, no countdown, no curated photo shoot. Just quiet confirmations, direct RSVPs, and one date circled on the calendar that stood for everything I had waited too long to reclaim. Let her have her nursery tours and baby shower bingo and bump pics with poetic captions. Let her believe she still held the narrative. I had stopped playing the game. The pieces were already in place, and the invitations were already sent. Now, all that was left was the wedding. The morning of my wedding dawned not with the cinematic elegance I had once imagined. No slow rays of sunlight slipping through gauzy curtains. No quiet joy swelling in my chest as birds chirped and soft music played in the background, but instead with a kind of thick, aching stillness, the kind that settles when something monumental is about to happen, not because of the vows or the flowers or the expensive photographer arriving too early, but because everyone involved knows, whether they admit it or not, that beneath the surface of this carefully orchestrated celebration is a fault line of resentment. And today, one way or another, something will crack. I had chosen an old estate just outside the city, the kind with ivy-covered walls and weathered bricks, and a garden that, in autumn, looked like something out of an oil painting. Rich and overripe and full of stories that no one bothered to record. The air was cool but dry, crisp in that way October sometimes gives you, like a peace offering for the coming winter. I stood in front of the full-length mirror in the bridal suite, the dress hugging me in all the right places, my makeup sharp and deliberate, not the soft romantic look I had originally envisioned, but a version of me that said, without apology, "I am here, and I am not backing down." By 10 o'clock, the texts had started trickling in, cousins, a few aunts, and even two of my mom's friends who had RSVP'd yes, all offering some version of the same message. "So sorry, but Ashley's gone into labor. Sending love from the hospital. Thinking of you both today. As if this moment belonged to both of us. As if my sister's uterus had somehow earned equal billing with my wedding ceremony." I didn't respond. I didn't ask for updates. I didn't even flinch. Because I had known this was coming and I had prepared myself, not just for the physical absence of half the family, but for the emotional weight of it. The knowledge that no matter how beautiful this day would be, someone would try to frame it as selfish, as cruel, as a poor choice in timing, as if I had just randomly stumbled into this date without knowing what it meant. My mother wasn't there. That, I will admit, hurt more than I expected. She didn't call, she didn't write. She didn't send a message with my dad, who arrived late, sat in the very back, and avoided eye contact throughout the ceremony. I saw him once, in the periphery of my vision, wiping his brow and adjusting his tie like the whole thing made him deeply uncomfortable. And maybe it did. Maybe seeing his eldest daughter walk down the aisle while his youngest gave birth in a hospital room a few miles away was just too much duality to process in one day. But despite all of it, despite the empty chairs and the tension and the inevitable gossip that would follow, my wedding was beautiful, breathtaking even. The ceremony was held in the garden under a massive oak tree that had likely seen 100 years of people coming and going, loving and losing. My vows were spoken clearly, steadily, with a voice that had once trembled in the shadows of my sister's louder, shinier existence, but now rang out, unshaken, across a lawn full of people who had chosen to show up for me. Derek stood at the altar, calm and sure, his eyes never leaving mine. And in that moment, with the wind rustling the leaves above and the sun catching the golden thread on my veil, I felt what I hadn't felt since before that engagement party: peace. Not because Ashley was absent, but because her absence finally allowed me to be fully present. The reception was intimate, pared down, but full of warmth. We had 72 guests instead of the planned 120, and honestly, I preferred it that way. Fewer eyes to judge, fewer whispers in the corners, more dancing, more wine, more laughter that didn't feel forced. It was around 9 o'clock when I got the text. I was sipping champagne near the head table, Derek's hand on my waist, when my phone buzzed. I didn't check it right away. I waited until I was alone, near the restroom hallway, before pulling it from my clutch. It was from my dad. She had the baby, healthy girl, everyone's fine. That was it. No name, no photo, no punctuation. I stared at the message for a moment, then locked the phone and returned to the dance floor. I didn't tell Derek, I didn't tell anyone. I just let the night continue, uninterrupted, filled with cake and clinking glasses, and the occasional sideways glance from those who were just now realizing that half the family wasn't coming back. I don't know what Ashley expected that night. Maybe she thought I'd postpone. Maybe she thought I'd at least acknowledge her sacrifice, that I'd crumble under the guilt and call her, or rush to the hospital afterward with flowers and a tearful apology for daring to prioritize my own happiness. But I didn't. I didn't cry. I didn't fold. I didn't even flinch. She didn't post the birth announcement online. Not that night. Not the next day. A full week passed before she uploaded a single photo, and when she did, the caption was just a name and a date. No glitter, no fanfare, no dramatic storytelling. It was muted, understated, almost like she wanted to forget that her daughter had been born on a day when the world didn't stop spinning for her. And that was my moment. Not the ceremony, not the vows, not even the kiss under the oak tree, but that silence, that one tiny ripple in her curated world where, for the first time, she wasn't the main character. She would never admit it. She'd never say it aloud. But I had taken something back. Not just a day, but a truth. The truth that I wasn't hers to overshadow, that I could draw a line and hold it no matter who crossed it. And I had done it without yelling, without confrontation, without a single outburst. Just a date, just a wedding, just all eyes finally on me. Months passed in the quiet way that life often insists on moving, not with explosions or apologies, not with the grand confrontations we expect from movies or dramatic novels, but with a gradual erosion of routine, days folding into each other like laundry left too long in the basket, losing their edges, their urgency, and yet somehow taking up more space than they should. My wedding photos were printed, framed, shared quietly among the few who had attended without needing to explain themselves, while Ashley's baby pictures flooded the rest of the family's social feeds in curated bursts of filtered joy, a perfectly constructed motherhood narrative unfolding in real time, as though our duel of dates had never happened. Or worse, as though it had been won by her. We did not speak. There was no phone call, no message, not even a cold congratulations on either side. The last time I had seen her was over a year ago, when she was leaning on a patio chair with one hand on her flat stomach and the other clutching a mocktail, and the words she used to slice through my engagement still echoed in my memory, like a tune you can't unhear, no matter how many other songs you play. She had looked at me that day with a smile, but behind her eyes was something sharp, rehearsed, almost bored. A look that said, "Your happiness is temporary, but mine will last forever." And I had believed her, for a moment, until I didn't. We saw each other again for the first time on Christmas Eve at my parents' house, a gathering that felt more like an obligation than a celebration, where everyone walked on the kind of metaphorical eggshells that cracked not under weight, but under silence. My mother had tried, in her own way, to normalize things by assigning seating arrangements that forced us across from one another at the dinner table. But the effect was more like watching two countries negotiate a ceasefire, under candlelight and cranberry sauce. Ashley arrived late, her baby wrapped in a too-perfect holiday outfit, her smile painted on, her eyes flicking toward me only once and then never again. She made small talk with the relatives, accepted compliments on her daughter's curls and big eyes, deflected questions about sleep schedules and diapers with charming complaints, and for a while, it really did seem like she had risen above it all, like she had forgiven me, or perhaps chosen to forget, which is an entirely different kind of power play. But then, as dessert was served and conversation splintered into side stories and clinking cutlery, she said it. Not loudly, not directly, but loud enough for me to hear. "Of course, I still haven't forgiven her," she said to our cousin Maddie, who nodded in that half-sympathetic, half-intrigued way that people do when they're more interested in the gossip than the grief. I didn't respond. I didn't look up. I cut a piece of pie and smiled at Derek, who gently touched my hand under the table, a quiet reminder that not all things needed answers. Some wounds speak loudest when left untouched, but it didn't stop there. In the weeks that followed, the tension turned into an unspoken family rule. Don't bring up the wedding, don't mention the date, don't acknowledge the fact that two milestone events had collided and fractured something so foundational between us that neither of us seemed willing or able to fix it. Our mother avoided the topic altogether, preferring instead to focus on the baby, who had become a convenient distraction from the fact that her two daughters could no longer occupy the same emotional space without unsettling everyone around them. And yet, even with the fracture exposed and untreated, I did not regret it. I remember one night, long after the tree had been taken down and the leftovers frozen, sitting across from Derek at the kitchen table with mugs of tea growing cold between us, the silence of the house stretching comfortably around us. He looked at me, truly looked, the way people do when they aren't trying to fix you, but just want to know what you're carrying, and asked with a softness I didn't expect, "Do you ever wish you had picked a different date?" It wasn't a trap, it wasn't judgment, it was curiosity. He wanted to understand. I thought about it for a long moment, letting the steam curl up between us. "No," I said, and it was the truest thing I'd said in weeks. I regret that she put me in a position to make that choice, but I don't regret making it. He nodded as if he had expected that answer all along. The truth is, people love to moralize revenge, to reduce it to either noble or petty, justified or cruel, as if there is no space in between, where dignity and rage hold hands and walk slowly toward balance. What I did wasn't about hurting Ashley. It was about not letting her rewrite the script one more time. It was about proving, to her, to our parents, and to myself, that I would no longer be the one, Dagtan, who stepped aside, who swallowed hurt like it was etiquette, who smiled while bleeding. And I think she knew that. I think that's what she really hasn't forgiven. Not the date, not the overlap, not the guest who didn't come to her hospital room because they were clinking glasses at my reception. No, what she hasn't forgiven is that I didn't play along. I didn't let her win. I didn't beg for understanding or compromise. I simply made a choice, clear, clean, irreversible, and forced her to live with it, the same way I had been forced to live with every moment she ever stole from me, under the guise of spontaneity or sisterly love. We don't talk about that day. Not at birthdays, not at dinners, not when my dad tries to bring up the old house, or when my mom glances nervously at the calendar. It's a shadow that lives in our family now. Not loud, not dramatic, but permanent. And maybe that's the most honest kind of consequence there is. Because some days are unforgettable, not because they were perfect, but because they were finally fully yours.